Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, HIPAA Compliance and Cybersecurity, 5 Things You Can Implement Within Your Organization Tomorrow, presented by Joe Macedo with Compliancy Group. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion today at the end of the webinar. Please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen, and they will be answered in the order received. Additionally, if you would like a copy of the presentation slides to keep or print out during the webinar, please find them on the right of your screen in the Handouts section. They will also be emailed to all participants following the completion of today's webinar, as well as a recorded version will also be available on the website for members only. Again, we would like to thank you for attending, and I will now turn things over to Joe.
Thank you, Bria. Much appreciated. And thank you, folks. I know it looks like we've still got people trickling in, so we'll go ahead and get started, but obviously there's a lot of good content here, and people get in as they can. So thank you, Bria, and thank you, MGMA. Much appreciated. And like Bria said, 5 things you guys can do today. But today, hopefully, we use today as an educational opportunity. And I'm going to go into a lot of this stuff today, but I'll explain a little bit about Compliancy Group and who we are, and why should we be talking to you guys about compliance and dictating some of this stuff to you today. So obviously you want to know who that's coming from. And I think a lot of people try to scare you when it comes to compliance. That's not what we're looking to do. Hopefully you leave today and we have plenty of education for you. As you guys see here, we do a lot in the market. I'll explain again about Compliancy Group, but more than welcome, come get some free resources from us. And any of the information today, like Bria said, will be recorded, but more importantly, we have a lot of content to share with you guys. We are very much an industry standard. We get about 46,000 unique visitors to the website every single month. If you just Google HIPAA compliance, you're going to find Compliancy Group right up there at the top of the screen with the federal government. So that's no doubt about that. So I'm Joe Macedo. I'm channel manager at Compliancy Group. And really why I even bring that up and what my role is specifically I work with a lot of IT folks throughout the industry. IT is very much goes hand in hand with compliance, right? You guys hear that a lot. But unfortunately, compliance and IT are 2 separate things, but they work together to make you hit a legal standard and to make you fully become HIPAA compliant, believe it or not. So I'm going to explain what those things are, what the differences are. And the reason I bring that up is right now in the market, folks, there's a 90% failure rate according to Health and Human Services. So we're going to learn a little bit more about what those gaps are and what people are not doing. But what I would say is there's a lot of confusion in the market, whether it's created from your internal IT team or created directly maybe from an outsourced IT provider that you guys might be using today that might not be helping you solve this full problem, or maybe they are. But a lot of confusion. There's a 90% failure rate according to Health and Human Services. I think you guys are probably on the call today to learn a little bit more. Are we doing the right things? Do we have everything we need? There is no doubt the government says all the time, you're probably doing some good things for HIPAA, but some good things do not help us pass audits. We legally need to do what is required, and we all know HIPAA is very cumbersome, and if you ever tried to read the 700 pages, it's very daunting, right? It looks like it's directed at a large hospital, but you guys might be a smaller entity or even a vendor of the medical community that has to be compliant as well. So I'm going to explain all this and how it ties in, but just to know, make sure you are doing, your friends that you guys keep do matter, and whoever you have in charge of IT, it's extremely important to be working with somebody who is fully compliant and understands this stuff, and you'll get my drift as we move through the webinar today. We have plenty of partners that you guys can choose from, but hopefully you guys are looking at the right partners for you guys and you have this stuff in place. So Compliancy Group, who we are, right? Who is this company? Why are they talking to me today? We very much are an industry standard. We have thousands of accounts. We have 40+ medical associations endorse us. We are an industry standard for compliance. We give out that seal in the community, that industry recognized seal right there on the left. We have never had a client fail an audit. So 90% failure rate by HHS. We have validated and verified 2 to 10 of our clients a month have gotten into a federal audit. We have never had a client ever fail. And we are looking to increase that number. So we do it on a daily basis, monthly basis, I should say. Never had a monetary penalty, because one of the things we'll learn today, you do not get a fine for having a breach. You have a chance to defend yourself. Your only defense is going to be that overall effective compliance plan, which is what Compliancy Group does. So that's what we do, and we have a software program, an industry-leading software program called The Guard. We are the makers of that, and we really do help organizations achieve it, maintain it, and we're auditors by nature, and we've never had a client ever fail. So what is it that we really want, right? We're on this call, we're sort of going to tie these things together, right? We're going to tie in what does it mean to be compliant, how IT comes together with compliance, but how does compliance really drive your brand? How does compliancy really help you guys do the things you need to do on a daily basis? So if you look on the screen today, right now, I would say, you know, do you really want more patients, revenue, profit, and practice value? You might look at compliance and say, well, how does that really fit in? And what do you mean by that? Well, if we are 100% compliant and we're doing the things we need to do legally, this is going to create a lot of value towards these points and even help you garner more patients, more revenue, profit, and value. And my job today is sort of to explain that, along with explaining, obviously, what it means legally to be compliant. So many people we talk to, believe me, you are not alone if you are looking like one of these doctors here. So the idea is, are we compliant? I'm not really sure. There's a 90% failure rate. I think we're doing the right things. A lot of people would say, hey, Joe, I have a nice risk assessment. Maybe my internal IT team, my outside IT security consultant, or somebody I know gave me a risk assessment on what is compliance. Well, we'll go through that. Security risk assessment, so analyzing your technology, is very important. It is the outer shell of compliance. It's what you need to do legally, but it's one of the 6 audits you have to do. There's, believe it or not, for covered entity medical practice, we'll go through what they are. There's a series of audits, so making one of them full is not going to make you fully compliant. So I'll go through what I mean. All the people say, well, I have manuals and policies and procedures, and we bought this from our trade association. It's sitting in a binder somewhere, right? The idea is that, yes, that's part of it. Not only do you have to keep up with this stuff, I'll go through all that, but the idea, you have to be doing this on an annual basis, and more importantly, you have to be keeping up with it, and who really knows it's on the top shelf, right? So you might have one, and that is part of being HIPAA compliant, but it is not making you fully compliant. So even if I had a good security risk assessment, and I had good documentation on policies and procedures, that doesn't make me HIPAA compliant. And here's a good one that we see a lot, right? It's again, a good portion of compliance. It's what compliance or the federal government, HHS, is going to dictate what you have to do. Part of it is doing training, right? So a lot of people do say, I have training for my staff, and that's great. And that's a portion of compliance, but it does not help you become fully compliant. It is a portion of what you have to do. And yes, all the employees have to be trained. Legally, it is about the company. It is not about an individual. So even if you have an individual who says, I have a certificate in HIPAA compliance, that does not mean anything for the entity. You guys have to be complete as a whole. And that includes all your employees going through training, and it includes, a few other things that I'll go through. So having these things, again, this is good stuff, risk assessments, training, policies and procedures, all very good things. But that does not alone make you HIPAA compliant, and that's what we want to go through today. One of the things I will bring up right in the beginning, and you guys, as Bria said, feel free to type in questions. I'm happy to get to them at the end and address them. But the idea is there's 2 types of entities that need to be compliant. There's a business associate and there's a covered entity. Covered entity is a direct medical practice. You guys, most of you on this call, I would assume you might be in that covered entity range, or maybe you are a business associate, but covered entity is a direct medical practice, somebody dealing directly with PHI, you're performing treatment, you're billing insurance, that type of thing. A business associate and covered entity has always had to be HIPAA compliant as of 1995, when it was written, 1996, I think it was passed into law. That's when you had to be compliant. Vendors now, business associates, so the top one. Those are people, and you see the guy there with his arms crossed. It's kind of funny. The idea is that the vendors that, or friends, I like to say, in the industry that you keep, this really does matter now. After 2013, the government made some rule changes, and they said the vendors that you have, so your billing companies, your shredding companies, your accountants, your lawyers, anybody that performs a business function to you, and they have potential access to your medical information, well, guess what? As of 2013, they have to be compliant as well. So a lot of people don't understand that. And then also, where does that fall in line with you guys, right? So where's the liability for me as a covered entity working with somebody who might not be HIPAA compliant? So you really want to understand this, especially in a failure rate of 90%. And that's why we work with IT companies that are fully compliant. I think you guys in your states, there's a company called Metro MSP, a very good MSP, managed service provider, IT consultants that really do a good job on compliance. So really picking the vendors you have really does matter, right? It's very important to choose the right vendor. I'll go through what your liability is, but I just wanted to point out two types of entities. Covered entity, direct medical practice. Business associate is somebody who performs a business function to you that now has to be compliant because they have potential access to your information. So the idea is those are anybody of your business function. So you really need to know that. And there is the business associate agreement, which I'll go over a little later. That's legally something you have to have in place as a covered entity with your business associate. So really, I get a lot of things in the industry and say, Joe, isn't this good enough, right? You know, I have some HIPAA things in place, but I didn't really incorporate anything. I just sort of checked off a box, and I could say I'm doing it, right? That's good, and I guess it's going to help you in some regard, but it's not helping compliance drive the value in your practice, gain more patients, loyalty, and all this stuff. And what do I mean by that? Well, think about who really controls your brand, right? Who is the people that really are going to dictate your future, right? To be honest, of your organization, your practice, your business. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from your patients, right? And you know today with the level of technology, and as we start to get into technology here, why this is important, right? So the idea is I think 10 years ago you could have got away with not doing as much technology, but today's world, not only legally are there things that you have to do on the HIPAA front, but just adopting the importance of good technology is extremely important, right? So if you look at all the let's say millennials out there, and it doesn't have to be millennials, but the idea is think about how they search for information, think about what they're doing on a daily basis. They are 100% going to go online, check you guys out. This is nothing new. You need me to preach to you guys, folks, but the idea is this really has to work in synthesis, guys. This technology and your compliance should be working in synthesis, but more importantly, start to put out a good profile out there. Make sure you have good reviews, right? Make sure that people are going to see, would you go to your own practice just by looking at some of the stuff online? So I think there was a time and place that technology was a luxury where I could sort of, you know, spend some money in IT and be okay. I think it's now one of the top forefronts of your business, right? I think it could really change the value of your practice and how people really communicate with you, interface, the idea of them understanding who you are and doing reviews on you. They really need to know that, and you need to use good technology to do that, right? You're not going to have a good web presence without a website, or you're not going to have some good reviews without really keeping track of it and organizing it. So this is stuff you really should start to pay attention to and see what your brand looks like online, because these people obviously are coming online, right? And again, I'll tie this back to HIPAA, but the idea being this is extremely important, and having good online reviews is important. But one of the things you don't want to have is a HIPAA violation, and that being rampant online, right? So that's what we deal with on a daily basis. There's so many violations and different kind of breaches occurring, and that's very bad publicity. I'm going to go into later what is the wall of shame by HHS. They actually list you on their wall of shame, and that is a very detrimental thing to any medical practice or anybody dealing in the medical space. You do not want to be on that wall of shame. So definitely keep up with your technology, right? People want things to make their life easier. So if you have more online, automated stuff, but more importantly, getting back to reviews and what people look at, take a look at it for yourself, right? Just be in there, pretend you're a patient, and take a look at it, right? So having that technology presence is important, but technology itself, along with the compliance angle on technology, is really going to help you safeguard your practice. And that's what I really wanted to talk about. So yes, go in, check your image, very important. There's a lot of people that can help you with that stuff, but tying it back to HIPAA, right? So right now, if we look at some industry statistics, and these are very good industry statistics that we pick out, this is nothing that we just simply make up. So are you confident your healthcare providers protect your medical records, right? 68% say not confident. That's not good, right? If that was 10%, 20%, okay, fine, it's creeping up a little higher. 68% is not good, and we all know this, right? You don't need me to tell you that. This is the average number of medical records breached per day. It seems like every day I come into the office, I have my Google pinged on anything HIPAA compliance or violations or fines issued in the market. You see a lot of breaches occur. Breaches are occurring daily. 17,000 medical records breached per day. That's the average, right? So there was a time, and I'll sort of reiterate this point, prior to 2013, many of you on this call, you were never going to see an audit. An audit was never going to come across your desk. You weren't going to be looked at by the federal government, even if you made a mistake. That time has passed. So this has totally changed, right? So the idea that there is so many breaches out there, the government's trying to keep up, they're investigating these breaches, but it's only a matter of time before you have an audit, right? So a lot of times, I'll save you the background. Prior to 2013, you did not have to worry about this. After 2013, much different story, right? So the idea is that small, mid-sized practices, vendors of the community, nonprofits, right? You got a rural Alaskan nonprofit, I think it was 13 employees. They got fined a few years back, and that really started a lot of the small, mid-sized practices. So if they're willing to find somebody in that area of the country, in rural Alaska, 13 employees, they pretty much can find anybody. And you'll find a lot of these examples, right? So you don't need me to tell you. Right now, Health and Human Services, they have the Office of Civil Rights, which is the enforcement arm. The issue of fines for HIPAA compliance would go under OCR, Office of Civil Rights. They have what is their wall of shame. Over 1,900 entities are listed on this wall of shame. I'm not going to do the shock and awe for you today. That's not what this is about. Average HIPAA fine is $1.5 million. So, Joe, what if I just paid the average HIPAA fine? I come back in business, I paid my fine, I'm good to go, right? Remember the online presence. So if I'm Joe at Compliancy Group and I'm finding a new doctor and I Google John Smith's medical practice and you come in on as Google and you're coming in on HHS's wall of shame for a HIPAA breach, because that's information that does not come off that website. As far as we can tell, they do not take your name down. So here you see some recent dates. You can see that right there. But the idea is that your name does not come down, as far as we can tell. So this dates back all the way to early 2000s when they started doing this. So the idea is that the name doesn't come down, and it's very detrimental. Somebody Googles your practice, I'm sure they're not going to give you their medical information when they can look right here. They can click down on why you had that breach, what happened to your practice, and you were in an investigation for HHS for a HIPAA violation. I'm not giving you my medical information. I'm going to go to the next practice, right? So the idea is this is something that really is something you should take seriously. These names were not going to be on the wall of shame, again, prior to 2013. And the reason you have not seen your neighbor fined, if you go look at some of the breaches there on that website, again, HHS has the wall of shame. You can look it up. You can find many breaches, probably a lot of people in your state that you might even know some of those people. So the idea is those fines don't come out until 4, 5, 6 years down the road. So if you look at some of the fines that trickle in, if they only started enforcing in 2013, you're only starting to see the fines trickle in now, but you're also seeing the most heavily regulated year after year, right? I think last year, $24+ million in fines. So the idea is they're going up and up and up and up, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse because we know the amount of audits that have occurred. So what really drives, and we're getting, I know folks, some of you guys are on here thinking, I just want to get to what do I need to do to be compliant? And I am doing that. Hopefully you are learning something. I am going to get to that, I promise. Don't hold it against me. But I think that this is all good stuff, and you guys really should know this stuff. This is very important, but I will be getting to that very soon. So what really drives patient loyalty, right? So think about, and you might be looking at those companies down there, right? So think about how big those companies, right? What does that have to do with me, Joe? Walt Disney, Nordstrom, and Starbucks, right? What does that have to do with me? Well, if you think about how they're able to perform, if you think about how they're able to give their personal experience or their, let's say, loyalty of their customers, how are they able to garner that or get that? That's compliance, folks, right? So really what they do, and I'll expand on this, they're following a set of protocols. They're following their compliance plan. So yes, it's nice to check off a box, but it's nice to be able to do these things in conjunction with how you are operating as a company. There is a reason I can go to a New York Starbucks where I am today, or I can go to London in 3 hours and get the same cup of coffee that's made the same way. How do they do that? Well, they follow a set of protocols. It comes out the same way each and every time, and it's the same experience, right? So it does not matter where I go, it's that same experience. And we know that you guys are a different size company. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that you can use this stuff and start to implement some of this stuff and really understand this stuff, right? So it's not, again, we at Compliancy Group would help you check off the boxes so you legally become compliant and you're doing the right thing. We're not looking to overhaul your business overnight. But you need to start to adopt these things into your practice, right? You got to start to move into this direction because it's going to synthesize everything in the same way, right? You're going to have everybody playing on the same tune. You're going to know how to handle certain incidences. You're going to be able to do certain things. And what we're looking at now, this is what obviously those companies would have done, right? Implement policies, procedures, right? Designate a certain person, conduct training and education, effective lines of communication. You guys don't need me to read this to you, but obviously what I was going at is it is different than IT. Right? Compliance is different than IT, but it works together. IT needs to be hit to be compliant, don't get me wrong, but compliance is slightly different. It is these type of things. And what you guys are looking at, folks, this is the 7 fundamental elements of an effective compliance program. It's put out by the Office of Inspector General. It's made for many types of compliances that our federal government runs, HIPAA being one of them. This is a scorecard for what an auditor would use. So obviously they need you legally to be HIPAA compliant. I'm going to go through what those things are. But this is what you can expect as a bird's eye view, right? This is not the granular look, but I wanted to get you thinking in the right way. This is what they're going to look at if they come in to do an investigation on your practice. So yes, I might say I'm secure. I might say I have some of this stuff in place, but how well can you dictate an effective plan based on these things? And this is also why those companies are successful. Believe it or not, they do follow this guideline. This is their guideline that they follow, and they're going to do it for their own industry, but that's very similar to what they're going to do. So having that really talk to your business is what I'm saying. So it's one thing to say you're compliant, but it's another thing to understand what it means and how it's changed your company. So one of the big things is, again, you never get fined for the breach, right? So if I have a breach, excuse me as I take a sip, sorry. Take a sip of water, sorry about that. A breach is something that's going to occur. It's something that the government says is a mistake or an accident. We didn't plan for that breach, right? We didn't plan to, let's say, get ransomware on the network. And for those of you who don't know ransomware is very prevalent in not only the IT industry, but throughout healthcare. I think healthcare, 31% is 31% of, yeah, I was just making sure before I said it. 31% of ransomware was dedicated towards healthcare entities. So that's the highest for any vertical. So ransomware, I'm not going to go into a big thing on it, folks, but just know the reason I have it here is it's very prevalent. It's causing a lot of breaches. The idea is they lock your files, right? So you get on it through some form of email. You might be clicking on something, or somebody lets some unauthorized access on the network, and all of a sudden it's locking your files, and you have to pay a ransom to get those files back, unless you were working with a very good IT company who knows how to who knows how to snapshot back in time, and you don't have to pay the fine. But it still might be a HIPAA violation. So you see there the numbers. I'm not going to read them to you, but just what it costs per record and all that stuff. But ransomware is very prevalent, folks. And one of the big things about ransomware, this happens a lot. And we were just talking prior to this call, Bria and folks online. We were talking about a recent ransomware attack, and this is something that happens all the time. So we want to get you guys good information on this stuff. So ransomware is very prevalent, and there's no safeguard for ransomware. What does that mean? Well, you can't just stop ransomware, right? So you can see the stuff on the left-hand side. If I can direct your attention to, where it's coming from, right? It's going to come through some form of human element, right? It's something an employee did. Again, a mistake, right? Not something they wanted to do, not something they wanted to cause harm to their organization. So the idea is that something they just weren't trained on it effectively. They might have clicked on something or done something or gone to a malicious website. That's why it's important for IT to work together with compliance. They would have prevented you guys from going to some of those sites, but more importantly, let's say if it still happened, because there's no really good defense. I mean, this is just, even what the industry says here on the bottom, these are just things that people had in place and they still got ransomware. And I talk to a lot of top cybersecurity experts. There is no good defense. It's really your employees, right? You got to be trained on what to look for. They're really massaging these emails to look very close to what you're expecting. And a lot of small, mid-sized practices, what's the chances they're going to come after us? Well, the chances are very high nowadays, right? You can talk to any one of our partners or anybody at our team to understand that, but we see it on a daily basis. But I think the large practices have exhausted their attempts. They've become more secure. They've trained their staff. There needs to be other targets for the hackers and black market to go after. So ransomware is very important. It's prevalent. You should be aware of it. And one of the key things is that you don't know where this money's going, folks. I do not like reading stories that we gave whatever amount of money to these people that are demanding the ransom. The recent one I saw was an IT company, $14 million, I think they were asking for. That was the highest one I've seen. So that was a lot to get the files back. And basically what happened here is they were basically an IT provider that provides services for medical practices. and they got infected and infected all their clients. So you really have to know the client. You have to know the vendors you're working with, right? Really understand that, and I'll go over in a second what your safeguards and responsibility are when choosing those vendors. But ransomware is something you really need to take seriously, even if you legally have to be HIPAA compliant. But I would get your training or your staff trained on this stuff immediately. This is something that is hitting the market at a high rate. And like I said, there is no good defense, only the employees who clicked on stuff. So the more that they're trained is better. Okay, so this is the last slide, folks, and we're getting right into what does it mean to be compliant? What's that tie-in to compliance and security I've been waiting for, and I promise it's coming. So here's an example of compliance issues and how they can happen in everyday life, right? So this was a National Weather Center a National Emergency Services Center in Hawaii, and this picture was actually in one of their publications in their paper. So the guy's taking a picture there, right? They was tracking a storm, whatever they were doing, and then this picture posts in the paper, and if I look and I zoom in, this is it's a silly mistake, but it goes to show you what happens. How many people on the call do this? You put your password on your computer screen, now someone took a picture of it, now it just went out to everybody in the paper, right? So now that is a violation, folks. We cannot have that, right? So take your sticky notes down. My point here is that the breaches are going to happen, and the audits would happen on stuff that you are not expecting or coming from an angle you're not expecting. So, Joe, I'm never going to have a breach. I have all this IT in place. Well, we just learned that ransomware, there's no good protection against ransomware. It's an employee thing that eventually something's going to happen. You get stuff like this, whether it's a picture, the recent violation in HIPAA compliance. If you look a couple weeks back, it was a dental practice, and they got fined for posting something on social media. So one of the employees posted something. They had no idea they were doing that, and they did, and they got in trouble. They had an audit. So the idea is these are the type of things that get you in trouble, folks. It's the human element, right? It's not so much all the time your safeguards. And believe me, your outer shell safeguards on IT is extremely important, but these attacks are coming from everywhere, right? You have to be protected. I think the new industry statistic, 1 in 9 smart devices will be lost in the next 2 years. So if you have more than 10 employees, I pretty much guarantee by the industry statistics, you're going to have some type of breach in the next 2 years. So if you lose a medical device, if you lose your personal phone and it has access to email, if it has access to your electronic health records, or you have a laptop on vacation and you lose it, that's actually been the subject of a HIPAA fine, one of the early ones. But the idea is you lose devices at a rampant rate now. You have to report that to the government. If you report it to the government, it's a higher risk of an audit. And are you ready to pass with your full compliance plan? And that's what we're going to go through today. Right now, that's what I'm going to take you guys through. So what does it mean to be secure and compliant? How does it tie into what we're talking about on all this security stuff, and what does it actually mean? So if I was to ask a security professional, and that's what we deal with a lot, folks, so obviously anybody in IT, they take compliance seriously that works with us. We only work with the best that take this very seriously. If you were to ask them about compliance and cybersecurity and technology, you're going to get a lot of bits and bytes answers, right? Even your own internal IT team. Right? If you ask them, what does it mean to be secure? And you guys could do this as a little spoof or a game, but what does it mean to you to be secure? Well, you're going to get a lot of technology type answers, and that's perfectly fine. Hey, look, my IT company, that's what they do, Joe. Why would they say anything else? And what are we really getting at here? Your definition of security is slightly different, right? You have security on the IT side, no doubt. You need that stuff in place. But you also need administrative and physical security. It's something else that you guys need to address, privacy and other things. So security to you means more to your business than just bits and bytes and technology. Why do you care of your security outside of IT? Well, the industry statistics, and these come right with CompTIA, folks. So CompTIA, for anybody who's not familiar, if you Google CompTIA, it's the largest certification body in the world regarding IT techs. We do a lot of work with them. We sit on their advisory council. We influence the board of directors there. So we do a lot of work with them in that industry. But anyway, these statistics, very good statistics, very good company, by the way. They provide these statistics. 76% of the breaches that occurred last year, let's say for HIPAA compliance, were things that were outside your IT's control. So if Sally or Johnny on my front desk lost their device at a bar on a Saturday because they were drunk, or somebody downloaded a phishing attack email, or somebody sent the wrong fax to the wrong number, or we just, maybe we just blatantly had somebody steal medical information, These are all things that have to be reported. I like the 26%. Well, I don't like it. It's not a great number, but it goes to show you what I'm talking about. So 26% of the time, the internal IT staff or your outsourced cybersecurity consultant, who's supposed to be knowing this stuff, by the way, is actually the person who made the mistake to open up a port or do something to create a hole, basically, for somebody to get into your network. And more importantly, they weren't talking to your compliance team to understand what they could have or could not have done based on being on site. So let's say they opened up a port, if you're familiar with that term, and you got a hacker who got in because of that port that was opened by your IT team, right? So that's important that they caused that, and they're supposed to be the ones protecting you. So if that occurs, it is all mandated by law right now, right? We have to report this, right? So part of our breach notification protocols is we have to report a potential HIPAA breach. As of a few years ago, folks, this is mandated by law. This is no longer an option, right? So a lot of people say, maybe I'll report. No, you can't do that. If you think about reporting it and they catch you before you report it, then they can fine you for not reporting it. But you legally have to report it. And then after reporting it, it's a higher risk of an audit. If you had an audit, what we're trying to point out, and really all this slide is going to say, is 1/3 of one rule of HIPAA is IT. So all of IT compliance fits in this bucket right here. It's my security risk assessment. Maybe I need it for meaningful use or macro MIPS or the attestation to the federal government for a larger payout for the following year. So security measures are in place. I have good technical safeguards, but it is a portion of one rule. So what happens is if they came in to do an audit, I'm not doing everything I legally need to do. And that's what I'll go through in a second. We're going to go through that pinwheel of everything you legally need to do. But if I'm just doing IT, I am not fully compliant. And why your IT companies matter and why that matters to them and why it should matter to you is they were the first ones ever looked at. So if you think about compliance and HIPAA compliance and fines, the first non-medical practice ever fined was an IT firm out of Philadelphia. It was a $650,000 fine in 2016. They failed for not being compliant and they were servicing medical accounts. And they weren't the only one. You see the other one at Cottage Health there being sued. So the idea is your friends that you keep really do matter. They should understand this stuff because there obviously is a time when if you get into a breach, you're going to have an audit. And if you have an audit, your security should be more than some of the bits and bytes of the technology that they're spewing to you. So the idea is that it should work in synthesis. You should have the rest of it together. I'll explain what that stuff is. If you guys are working with somebody and they fail an audit, you have the government has a legal right to audit any practice associated with that failed entity. So you really want to do a spot check on your vendors, right? That's really what I'm getting at. IT and compliance definitely go together. Metro MSP is a good one to use. Just you guys can Google that one. But the idea is that you want to reach out and you want to make sure that they're on the same page with your compliance. And if they're not helping you, not only helping you with it, but just talking to it, I think that's where the disconnect comes. And if they fail their audit, that's why you should do due diligence on them. I'll explain how we do it. But if they fail their audit, they're going to put you at risk for being into an audit. Nobody wants to be into an audit based on somebody else failing. So that's extremely important to know. And what we're trying to illustrate on this slide is IT is on the left-hand side. If I did every single thing correct as per the HIPAA law, there's no such thing as HIPAA light, but let's say I did all the IT protocols for HIPAA that HIPAA requires. It required the security risk assessment, but yes, there's other audits outside of IT. We did all of our security remediation. We put in good technical safeguards, and our network's up to snuff. It is protected. Well, that is a portion of the remediation effort, as that is the IT side. You have to do the rest of the non-IT. I'll go through that. But let's say you even have security policies, procedures, and training, and this is pretty good. It sounds good. It sounds like I have an audit done every year. It sounds like I have good technical safeguards. It sounds like I have good security policies and procedures and training for my staff. So what else do I really need, right? What you really need is on the right-hand side. I'm going to go through these modules very quickly, in a second, I should say, not very quickly. But the idea is I'll help you understand what these are. But this is legally what you have to have. Again, even if you were secure paying IT $1 million, it does not make you fully compliant. It needs to work in conjunction. You have to fill the rest of the boxes. And since your IT company has to be compliant as well, why aren't they helping you fill these boxes, right? So that's really where that tie-in comes from. All right, so on this portion, what we're going to do, and hopefully thank you guys for your patience, and gals, I appreciate you guys waiting online. You guys have been waiting very patiently. We haven't lost anybody, so that's a good thing. If anything, we just added a few more as I've gone. But this is really the key slide, folks. When you were asked about compliance, or you need to bring this back to management or bring it to anybody, or one thing you're going to learn today, I would say it's going to be this pinwheel that we'll go over, so that's extremely important. I'm going to go through those elements in a second. On the right-hand side, you'll see the pinwheel come alive, much similar to the previous slide before. I'm going to explain how we do it. I'm going to tie it into that pinwheel, just so you have a feel of what Compliancy Group does. So Compliancy Group, we have an industry-leading software with all this stuff built in. We do nothing more, nothing less than what you need legally. The Guard is a web-based portal, award-winning software for compliance. There's nothing to load onto your computers, anything like that. It's all in the cloud. It's all web-based. It's designed for all your employees to use. And we would help you guys achieve it. We have a coach. We know this is not something you guys are experts in, and you might be experts. Maybe you are. And if you are an expert, this is something that's going to provide checks and balances for you. But if you are a designated compliance officer, you have no idea what you're doing, this is a good program, because we're not just going to give you a tool to use to be compliant. I think it's going to teach you a culture of compliance, and that's really what you're looking for. It's not just, hey, I checked off the box, I have no idea what it means, but I did it, and I guess I'm fine. This is more of, let's validate your compliance. So we have a coach that would work with you guys. We call it Achieve, Illustrate, Maintain. The coach is going to work with you guys through it, series of questions and different things we have to hit each year to make sure you're hitting your legalities. We help you illustrate it. There's a seal that goes on the website, right? It's an industry seal. You've seen it a couple times throughout this presentation. People can click on it and validate your compliance. It's kind of cool. Auto response program, so if you ever get into it, hopefully you would never need it. But 2 to 10 of our clients do every month. No client has gotten $1 worth of fines. So in an industry where there's a 90% failure rate, we have yet to have a single client ever fail. We just know what an auditor's playbook is. We're auditors ourselves, and we've helped large organizations out of fines. We know what they're looking for. They're looking for the same documentation over and over again, and that's the Guard. That's what is housed inside the Guard and what they legally want to see. So we're able to provide audit response. We don't charge you any money for that. The idea is we help you maintain it too, so maintenance is critical. You have to maintain your compliance. It happens all the time. People say, Joe, I did HIPAA 2 years ago, or I did it last month. Well, that's good. There's certain things you have to do each and every year, and I'm going to go through those things now. But HIPAA is sort of a living, breathing thing. If you have incidences occur, if you have new employees, a change in regulatory act, a change in a state regulation, these are all things that affect your plan. You have to keep up with this stuff. So it's not just, oh, I did it 3 years ago, I'm good. No, you got to review that stuff. And legally, this is only the stuff you have to do annually. So outside of the incidences that come up, outside of responding to that incident or having a new employee trained or something like that, how do I deal with compliance on a yearly basis? What is the government asking me, right? This is exactly what I was talking about. So this is the meat and potatoes of today's call, and please come to our website. We have plenty of info on this stuff if you guys need me to expand more. I don't want to bore you guys to death, but I want to give you guys good insight here. There's a series of 6 audits. So if I'm a covered entity medical practice, I'm dealing directly as a direct medical entity, I bill insurance, I treat patients, that type of entity, white coat doctors or somebody like that, I am a 6 audit per shop. I have to do 6 audits. I don't care if you're a large hospital all the way down to a single practitioner. The government mandates you do these 6 audits. It's a series of questions on IT, administrative practice, and physical location, 3 categories, but 6 different audits. You have to legally prove you're going through these audits each and every year. That's a covered entity. A business associate, believe it or not, so an IT provider, a consultant, a hosting company, EHR provider, medical billing company. And folks, they do not make you compliant. I hear that a lot. Oh, I'm using an EHR platform, they're compliant, that makes me compliant. No, it does not. You are responsible for this, just like they're responsible for their plan. It is helping you with some of their safeguards they put in place, but it doesn't help you analyze the level of risk at your practice. You guys have to do your 6 audits as well. So they're responsible to do 5. If you're a business associate on the call, you're a vendor of the community, 5 legal audits you have to go through every year. You don't have to do privacy. Privacy is something that medical shops and practices have to address. You do not have to address that as a vendor of the community. So it's 1 less audit. The next thing the government's looking for is their series of gaps that they've identified, and what is their remediation items for the year. So the government says you don't have to fix everything tomorrow, but they want to know that you read the regulation, you kept up with any legal changes, you analyzed the level of risk in your practice, aka the audits, and you've identified what these gaps are, and you built out remediation plans to address those gaps. Notice how what I'm saying here, you don't find almost, I have to be careful. You don't find many organizations that do this correctly. So a lot of people, again, to go back to, if I was to point at you guys and say, what do you guys do specifically to become compliant? Oh, Joe, we train our staff, we have email protection, and we use an EHR that has to be compliant. It's nice and it's helping, but this is the first two steps, folks. We have to show the audits, we have to identify what the gaps are and build remediation efforts. Anybody ever try to read the 700 pages of regulation? It's kind of mind-numbing, right? You don't want to, it's mind-numbing to the effect of, what are they asking me here? Why hasn't the government updated this stuff, right? So the idea, it's not so easy to do it on your own. It's not even so easy for a law firm to do it. So working with somebody like us who's auditors, we help different style practices, we can give you these audits right now. You can identify what your gaps are or try to, but the hard part is correlating what they mean for your size practice. So that's where we come in as auditors. That's what they mean for your type of practice, right? So that's where we come in to really help you customize it to your own practice, if that makes sense. So series of audits you have to do. So even if you're not with Compliance Group, this is something legally you have to do this stuff. 6 audits as a covered entity, 5 as a business associate. You have to show them a good gap analysis and show them you have identified your efforts and this is what your action items are to address those gaps. So where we work with IT, we're not the boots on the ground IT, where you're ongoing consultants for HIPAA, but we'll identify what safeguards need to be in place on the IT side. And again, you should work with somebody who's fully vested in compliance. They're compliance if they're doing IT, and anybody in the medical sector, A, they have to be compliant. So your IT provider, and I have a sheet that you can give to them to check to see if they're compliant. And don't just let them tell you. Let them, don't just ask them and they say yes. See if you can point out a few things and make sure they are doing it. So legally they have to be compliant, yes, but they have to help you. They should be talking to your compliance plan and helping you with this stuff. So for example, we're going to identify what technical gaps need to be addressed. Email encryption, better disaster recovery plan, better firewall, upgraded Windows system, that type of thing. The boots on the ground IT firm should understand this stuff, so they have to legally be compliant and know, and they're going to help you implement those technical safeguards. So they are now potentially getting access to PHI. They have to be compliant. So they'll help you with that stuff. We'll identify the gaps you need. But 80% of compliance is non-IT. So you might be thinking, what other gaps are there? Well, there's gaps in your policies. There's gaps in your procedures and your training for your staff. So the whole reason the government makes me go through the audits each year is maybe the regulatory act slightly changed. And that means we have to answer a question differently, which then triggers, since we answered that question differently, that might be different now in our policies and procedures, which then ultimately might be trickling down to our training docs, which we have to train our staff. So the idea is they want you to keep up with it, and you should be doing it annually. So every year, go through this stuff, identify what those gaps are. Obviously, year one, you're going to have a lot more heavier gaps. But your policies, procedures, and training, somebody like Compliance Group, we would take care of all that. We keep up with the Regulatory Act. We help you customize this, blah, blah, blah. But privacy and security policies and procedures need to be in place. You need to, and that's what we do. We would give these out. And then we help with the training docs for your staff, because every employee has to go through HIPAA 101 training. Again, a portion of compliance. Training, important, but it's a sub-portion. All employees have to do training, and they all legally have to attest to policies and procedures each and every year. So you have to review those audits, identify the gaps, pump them with some of the new updated stuff or changes in the act, and then you have to train your employees on that as well. So every year, that's what we do. We would put your employees through it. They all get a login. It's a web-based portal. There's nothing to load onto their system. We just keep you guys up to date and keep your employees up to date. But again, all employees, HIPAA 101 training, and attest that they read and understood your policies and procedures. I do not see that step a lot in the industry. That needs to be done. If you have a malicious intent, somebody steals medical information, not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but let's say you have a disgruntled employee, happens a lot. We see it a lot anyway. Somebody steals or does something wrong with medical information, your only defense could be that attestation that they read and understood everything. So the government can argue, yes, you had this stuff in place through your policies, but did they actually read it? Did they understand what they were doing was wrong? Well, no, they didn't really know it and read it, but they should have known that. It's in our policy. Yeah, but they didn't read it, and they didn't attest that they read and understood it. So that's what we need, is the attestation. And that's important. You don't want to pull that out for every employee that makes a mistake. That's not what we're looking to do. The idea is your compliance plan for your organization is going to protect that employee. They're not going to get in trouble for a mistake. Mistakes happen. If they're malicious in intent, your only defense could be that attestation. So you're going to want to pull that out in time of need. I wanted to make that clear. So these employees are not on the hook. I'm not trying to say that they're going to be liable if they make a mistake. If they do something malicious, that's a different story. Business associate management. So the friends you keep. Remember we talked about business associates. We would help you identify who all your BAs are. So the first thing you should do is identify who your business associates are. Make sure you have proper business associate agreements in place with those vendors. So if you're a covered entity, you are directly responsible to have that BAA in place. It's called a business associate agreement. It is legally something you have to have with every one of your vendors. They are not the responsible party, you are. So the idea is that you have to sign off on that agreement. You're stating you're compliant, which means, AKA, I'm doing this stuff, and I'm going to say that you're not responsible, Mr. IT vendor or somebody else, billing company, shredding company, whatever. You're responsible for your compliance. I'm responsible for mine, but we're going to enter into an agreement with there's less liability on these folks. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to be more liable. Well, just be careful what you sign. There's a 60% failure rate on BAAs in the market. So some vendors out there, yeah, they're going to try to get you to be more liable than you need to be, or vice versa. The medical practice is going to try to get you guys as a vendor to be more liable than you need to be. That's not what the Regulatory Act requires. So again, 60% failure rate. If you looked at ours, we have one, it's a 50-50 split of liability. You're just responsible for your compliance. They're responsible for theirs. But without a BAA in place, you guys are putting yourself in harm's way. If they, let's say they audit a vendor like the IT company gets audited, IT company fails because they're not compliant, one of the first clients they're going to look at is you because you don't have a BAA in place with that vendor, and they're going to look at that as a big red flag, and they're going to look at you next. So the idea is you have to get those in place. It's going to help your liability, not hurt it. We would also, so one more thing, sorry. We would help you, and the government recommends you do due diligence on your vendors. So we have a 42-point security questionnaire that goes out to all your vendors. We make sure they're hitting those proper safeguards on the IT side that they need to do as vendors in order to say that they're secure as part of being compliant. Incident management. So the idea is that how do I deal with an incident? So this is prevalent now because you're mandated by laws of a few years ago to report any potential breach. Excuse me. So any potential breach, if you lost a device, if you fell for a phishing attack email, if you had ransomware, if you had a potential fax to the wrong number, these are all incidences that have to be investigated. So the government wants to know, how are you looking into it? Who's in charge? What's your plan? Show me an example of. So that has to be in place. And that's good on paper, and that's what Compliance Group would do on paper. Here you go. We know what an auditor wants to see. But how do you actually do it, right? What if it's Sally or Johnny at the front desk and you guys are second job title as compliance officer? How do you actually do it? Well, part of what we would do, we're consultants that would stay with you for the entire year. We're not going to pigeonhole you into doing this in 5 days and then we're done. We just stay with you throughout the entire year. So those are the type of things we would help you with. That's what we do. But legally, you guys need to have this in place. Again, the series of audits, identifying gaps, building remediation efforts, having correct documentation, training of your staff on that documentation, providing BAAs and keeping up with those business associate agreements, and due diligence on your vendors, and having a good incident management plan in place, and being able to follow through with that incident management plan and dictate and let's say, have that in writing and have examples of incidences you've looked into is what they would want to see. So how do you sort of bring this all together? That's really what it means to be compliant. Hopefully you guys learned stuff on that call today regarding that, if you need information from us on that, but that is it. In a nutshell, that's legally what you need to do. So again, there is that checklist. You guys can come to our website. MGMA would also probably have that. They have that in the recording of this webinar. And we did say about things you can do today, right? So obviously we learned a lot today, right? We learned what we need to do to get compliant. So I'm going to say get compliant is one thing you guys should do today. But let's say, Joe, I think I have a lot of this stuff where I need to do other things today. Passwords, folks. Change your passwords frequently. The long story short is, you think the black market is not coming after you. I cannot tell you how wrong that is, dealing with your size practices on a daily basis. It is not just about the large enterprise practices now. They know that. And the medical record on the black market is still the most highly sought after record because of all the stuff that comes attached to it. So if they get their hands on that record, that's a lot of stuff that they can work with. Social security numbers, different names, different card numbers. So that's better than, here, you have my credit card. Okay, well, I'm just going to cancel my credit card and you're done. Well, with this, it's going to be a long, sticky process. So the idea is that you should be doing the right things for your patients. Don't let the hackers get in. Change your passwords frequently. So that's definitely important. I also think having a good disaster recovery plan, it might not be on there, but disaster recovery is extremely important nowadays with the ransomware. So to keep you from avoiding that fine, it's important to have a good disaster recovery plan to be able to go back in time and eliminate those files and pull up new files or ones you've backed up previously prior to that ransomware for hitting. If that ransomware hit and you had no good viable backup and only the backup of your current system, you're going to be in trouble and you're going to have to pay that fine or lose out on all that data. So obviously keep all antivirus malware up to date, right? I can't tell you how many times people say, well, this, support's running out for this company. Can I still keep it? Is it compliant? No, it's not, because that's how hackers and people get in, folks. They look at vulnerabilities. They look at stuff that's gone out of date, and that's how they're going to get in, right? So do some of this stuff, right? I think it's extremely important. But this is just some of the stuff that you can do. So hopefully that helped today. We are here for more information. Please feel free to reach out to us. Sorry about the New Jersey logo there. It came in, Bria, sorry about that. But please reach out, and I know many of you folks are outside of New Jersey, so I appreciate that. Reach out to us. There's a free checklist there. Come to our website. We have that free compliance checklist. You guys can download it for free. You don't have to take an annoying call from a salesperson on our side. You can just download that list, and you can request more information if you want to. So we appreciate it. Thanks for having us on, Bria. I'll pass it back to you now, and hopefully you guys learned something on this call today.
Thank you, Joe. That was a great presentation. If anyone has any questions, please type them in the question box located on the right of your screen. And while we wait for some of those questions to come through, Joe, do you have any questions on your end?
Yeah, I have a couple here, but I'll answer probably some of the better ones. Do I need a business associate agreement if I'm a vendor? Yes. So vendors are business associates. They're the vendor of the community to the medical practice. If you are working as a business function to a medical practice, you need to have that BAA in place. Not your legal responsibility, but obviously you have to have that in place. They are the responsible party, but without a BAA, you shouldn't do business with anybody. And that goes for you covered entity folks too. If you have somebody that is willing to do business with you and they're going to potentially have access to medical information, that BAA should be upfront. Before you do anything at all, please get that BAA checked out and looked into. Somebody is asking me, how do I know my data is for sale on the dark web? That is interesting. So there's many tools available. I suggest going to, again, you can go to Metro MSP. If you guys Google it, Metro MSP will help you out. But the idea is that there is free tools out there, different things you can look at to see if your stuff has hit the black market, and it is very scary out there. So the idea is that you can reach out to that and see, and you should see what's hit the black market, right? So that's something that's prevalent. If your IT company is not helping you with that stuff, right, that is stuff that you guys should know. So maybe you had a breach in the past, you just didn't even know about it, right? So you should be able to look up that stuff, and that's something they should help you with. So that's something new. They call it the dark web, which is really just the internet for hackers and thieves and things like that. And it's really is prevalent. One of the things I would say to leave this call to, that is prevalent, folks. This is not anything I'm making up. Again, I'm compliance. I'm not a security expert. I'm a compliance expert. But on the security side, these people are coming after small, mid-sized practices for sure. And that was not the case years ago. I think that you're seeing much more prevalence in that now. So really understanding where your liabilities are. But that's a good question. What other one? There's a list. Go ahead, Bria.
Do you need a BAA for your cleaning company?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Most of the time, it's a confidentiality agreement. So we would be auditors that would help you identify that stuff. And that's what I was talking about before. Some of this stuff is not cut and dry. So when you're sort of reading that and who needs a BAA, it's not cut and dry, right? So you need an auditor to help you or some kind of law professional to tell you exactly which one. But somebody like a cleaning crew, there is differences. If they are performing a business function, yes, but they're not really having access to computers or really like that. So the idea is, I believe that would be a confidentiality agreement and not a BAA agreement. But in some cases, that could differ depending on how you interact or what level of access you give to them. So great question. And I think I just don't have the honest answer. It could be many different things depending on how you interact with them. So really, I would suggest a law firm or a compliance group to help you with that. But great question. Good question.
Thank you. And then I have one more, is that someone said they received an error message when trying to download the checklist.
Checklist error. If you email me, I don't think so. If you go to compliancygroup.com and then just hit the checklist, you'll see it on our website. If there's any problems, issues, concerns, take down my name and number here or email address. You see that. It's Jay Macedo, but it's also Joseph. I know it's confusing because I got Joe here and I have Joe Macedo at, but you could also say Joseph at compliancygroup.com or Jay Macedo at compliancygroup.com. Just send me an email. I'll send you that checklist personally.
Okay, great. So I didn't have any further questions. I had a bunch of thank yous and appreciate the insight. So if that is it for the questions, then we can wrap this up. Once again, thank you to all participants. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the presenter. Once again, the presentation slides will be emailed to all participants and will be available on the website, as well as a quick survey is also coming your way because the feedback is important to us. So if you have any additional questions, please reach out directly. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Joe, for your presentation. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Bree. Very nice, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.